He thought I would break when I caught him with her. He thought my world would collapse, that I'd crawl back to him begging for answers I already knew. But heartbreak doesn't always destroy, it reshapes. The night I walked away from his lies, I never imagined the person waiting on the other side would be the one who could melt ice with just her presence. His boss. Powerful, untouchable, feared by many, and yet, she looked at me like I was something rare, something worth keeping. What started as revenge quickly became something deeper, something I never believed I deserved after betrayal. This isn't just about love, it's about finding yourself when someone tries to break you, and realizing that sometimes the coldest hearts carry the warmest fire. The night I found out he had cheated on me, it felt as if the air itself had been sucked out of my chest. I had always told myself I was strong, that nothing could shatter me if I kept my heart guarded, but nothing prepares you for the betrayal of someone you thought loved you. I remember standing in our apartment doorway, watching the scene unfold in front of me. His shirt half-buttoned, her laughter filling the room that once held our promises, his excuses tumbling out like broken glass. It wasn't just what he did, it was how little he seemed to care that destroyed me. In that moment, I wasn't just abandoned. I was humiliated, diminished, left with the bitter taste of trust turned to ash. My body felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish, but inside me something sharp snapped awake. I didn't cry that night, not in front of him. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Instead, I picked up my keys, walked out without a word, and left him in the ruins of what he had created. My steps echoed on the pavement as I left behind everything we had built together, or rather, everything I had convinced myself was real. I had nowhere to go, no plan, no destination. I just walked, feeling the city lights blur through tears I refused to let fall. My chest burned with an ache that begged for release, but my pride kept me upright. It wasn't until my phone buzzed, hours later, that I realized fate was about to twist in ways I never imagined. The name on the screen froze me in place. His boss. A woman I had only seen at company gatherings, a woman whose presence commanded silence, whose gaze could slice through pretense. She wasn't just his superior. She was the one person he seemed to fear and respect, the one he never dared to speak ill of. I stared at her name, wondering why she would be calling me, of all people. When I answered, her voice was steady, low, and controlled, carrying that same intensity one had always noticed from a distance. She told me she knew. She told me she had seen the truth I had stumbled upon, and that she had been waiting for me to discover it. At first, I thought it was pity, or some cruel twist of sympathy. But then she said something that lit a spark inside me. She said, "He doesn't deserve to break you. Come see me. Let me show you how wrong he was to think you were his to hurt." I didn't understand her intentions, but the pull in her voice was undeniable. For the first time that night, I felt seen, not as the broken girlfriend of a cheating man, but as someone worthy of more. The taxi ride to her penthouse felt surreal, like I was stepping out of my own skin and into a different story. My mind kept racing, questioning, doubting, yet something in me wanted to know why she reached out. When I arrived, the sight of her was overwhelming. Tall, poised, wrapped in elegance and authority, she opened the door herself. No assistant, no guards, no formalities. Just her. Her eyes lingered on me in a way that made the walls I had built around myself tremble. She didn't offer condolences, didn't waste words on clichés. Instead, she simply said, "You're stronger than the way he treated you. And I don't intend to let his weakness define you." I should have felt defensive, maybe even suspicious. But instead, her words slipped under my skin, soothing and piercing all at once. I realized then that she wasn't saving me out of kindness. She was claiming something, me. Not in the way he once did, not with fragile promises or shallow affection. No, this was different. This was deliberate, intentional, like she had already decided that my pain would not go to waste. That night, sitting across from her in a room filled with glass walls and city lights, I let myself unravel. I told her about the betrayal, the lies, the hollow love I had poured myself into. She listened without interruption, her gaze steady, her presence grounding me. For the first time since everything shattered, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel discarded. I felt chosen. I didn't know it yet, but that night marked the end of who I used to be. And the beginning of something far more dangerous, far more intoxicating, than I had ever known. Because the woman across from me wasn't just his boss. She was about to become the reason I believed in love again. The next morning, when I woke up on the couch in her penthouse, sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in shades of gold and glass. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I remembered the way she had listened to me, the way her quiet strength filled the room when my own strength had collapsed. For the first time in days, my chest felt lighter, though confusion still gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. Why had she done this? Why had she reached out to me, of all people? When she appeared from the kitchen, her presence seemed to command the entire space. She was in a crisp white blouse, her hair pinned neatly back, her expression unreadable. Yet her eyes softened when they met mine, and it unsettled me in ways I wasn't ready to admit. She placed a cup of coffee in front of me without a word, like she already knew what I needed. I wrapped my hands around the warmth, whispering a quiet thank you, though I couldn't stop my mind from racing. She was his boss. She must have known him in ways I didn't. Did she see his cruelty long before I did? Was she pitying me? Or was this something else entirely? She broke the silence first, telling me she had been aware of his carelessness for some time. Her voice carried no hesitation, only certainty, as if she had long ago weighed his worth and found him lacking. She said men like him thrive on the belief that women will accept crumbs of love and call it enough. I felt my throat tighten, because that was exactly what I had done, taken scraps of affection and convinced myself they were a feast. She looked at me then, her gaze unflinching, and said, "You're not the type to beg. You're the type to be worshipped." The words slammed into me with a force I couldn't explain. No one had ever said something like that to me, not with that tone, not with that conviction. I wanted to laugh it off, to deny it, but the truth was that part of me wanted desperately to believe her. I sat there, unable to look away from her, realizing she wasn't just giving me comfort. She was reshaping me. She was taking the pieces he had shattered and putting them back together in a way that felt unrecognizable. I wasn't the girl who had been cheated on anymore, not in her presence. I was something more, though I didn't yet know what. Hours passed, and she asked about my life outside of him, my passions, my dreams, the things I had given up in order to hold on to him. I confessed more than I intended, how I used to paint, how I once dreamed of traveling, how I had let my ambitions die quietly to fit into the little box of his expectations. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes told me she was listening deeply. When I finished, she leaned back, studying me in silence before saying, "He kept you small because he was afraid of your potential. I won't make the same mistake." I should have been cautious, but instead her words set my heart racing. There was something both terrifying and magnetic about the way she spoke, as if she had already decided my life would no longer belong to the shadows. The thought scared me because I knew stepping into her world meant stepping into something far more intense than anything I had known before. Yet I couldn't resist it. As the evening descended, she offered me a choice, to stay and discover what she could offer, or to walk away and return to the ruins of the life I had left behind. I looked at her, at the city burning with lights behind her silhouette, at the strength in her gaze that made me feel both vulnerable and powerful at once. Deep down, I knew I should have hesitated longer, questioned more, demanded clarity. But my heart, bruised and raw, was desperate for something different, something real. And so I whispered the words that sealed my fate, "I'll stay." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, sharp and knowing, and in that moment I realized this was not a rescue. This was a claiming. My story with him had ended in betrayal, but with her, it was just beginning in fire. That night felt different, heavier, as if the air itself carried a charge I couldn't escape. The decision I had made to stay lingered in my chest like a secret promise, one I wasn't sure I fully understood but couldn't take back. She moved through her penthouse with a calmness that unnerved me, like she had expected this outcome all along. I followed her silently, noticing the way her posture radiated authority, her every step deliberate and controlled. She didn't need to speak much to command the space, it bent naturally around her, just as I was beginning to realize I was bending too. We sat together at the long glass table that overlooked the city, its skyline glowing in the darkness. She poured a glass of wine for herself and one for me, the gesture fluid, precise, almost ritualistic. When she handed me the glass, her fingers brushed against mine for only a second, but that small contact sent a shock through me I couldn't ignore. I wanted to pull away, but at the same time, I didn't want to let go. My chest felt tight, and I realized it wasn't fear anymore, it was anticipation. She began to speak then, not about him, but about herself. She told me about the empire she had built, the battles she had fought, the sacrifices she had made to reach the top of her world. Her words weren't meant to impress me, they were simply her truth, laid bare with the same sharp precision she carried in every action. She spoke of loneliness too, though not in a way that begged for sympathy. It was loneliness disguised as resilience, as independence, as power. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her ice, the quiet ache that existed beneath her strength. And I found myself leaning forward, wanting to know more, wanting to understand how someone so untouchable could also be human. She studied me while she spoke, her eyes never leaving mine, as though she was measuring my reactions, searching for weakness or perhaps searching for something she could mold. I wondered if she saw me as fragile, broken, someone she could rebuild in her own image. The thought should have terrified me, yet instead it drew me closer. I wanted her to see me, not as a victim, but as someone worth choosing. Hours slipped by as we talked, and when I finally confessed how small he had made me feel, her expression hardened in a way that both frightened and thrilled me. She leaned closer, her voice low, almost a whisper, but laced with fire. "You were never small. He was just too weak to stand beside your strength." My throat tightened because those words dug into me deeper than any I had heard before. It was as though she had reached inside me and pulled out the very thing I had been hiding, the truth I had been too afraid to claim. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. She must have noticed, because her hand reached across the table, slow and deliberate, until it rested lightly over mine. That single touch undid me in ways I didn't want to admit. My body trembled, not out of fear, but out of recognition that this was the moment everything was shifting. I wasn't sure if it was love, or desire, or simply the intoxicating pull of being seen after so long, but whatever it was powerful. She didn't push further, didn't demand anything more than my presence. But the silence between us was filled with something heavy, something unspoken yet undeniable. That night, when I finally lay down in the guest room she had offered me, I couldn't close my eyes. I stared at the ceiling, replaying her words, her touch, her gaze. I thought about how wrong it felt to crave the comfort of the very woman who had the power to ruin him, and yet how right it felt to finally be near someone who made me feel alive again. I didn't know what we were becoming, or what this would turn into, but deep down, I knew this was no longer just about revenge or betrayal. This was about me finding something I had never had before, power, respect, and maybe even love in the most unexpected place. And as sleep finally dragged me under, one truth became clear: I wasn't the same woman who walked away from him. I was someone new, someone dangerous, because I had stepped willingly into her world, and there was no turning back. The days that followed unfolded like a slow-burning fire, one I couldn't put out even if I wanted to. Every morning I woke in her penthouse, I felt a strange mix of fear and safety, like I was walking a tightrope between who I used to be and who she was shaping me into. She didn't coddle me, didn't whisper empty comforts the way people usually did when they saw heartbreak. Instead, she challenged me in quiet, relentless ways. She asked me questions that forced me to face myself, questions about what I wanted, about why I had settled for so little, about why I let someone else's opinion of me decide my worth. At first, her words felt like knives, sharp and cutting, but slowly I realized they were carving away the parts of me that no longer served me. And in the silence between those moments, there was something else growing, something neither of us named, but both of us felt. She took me to her office for the first time, and walking into that building was like stepping into her world completely. Everyone stopped when she passed, their eyes dropping in quiet respect, their bodies shifting instinctively to give her space. She didn't need to demand power, she simply was power. I walked beside her, my heart pounding, aware of the curious glances people threw my way, aware that to them I was no one, just a shadow trailing behind their formidable boss. But when she glanced at me with the smallest nod, it felt like I belonged there, like she was telling me without words that I wasn't invisible anymore. Seeing him again was inevitable. I hadn't thought about how it would feel until it happened. He walked into her office, smug and careless as always, and for a moment, the old hurt threatened to crush me. But then I saw the way she looked at him, cold, sharp, unflinching, and suddenly I wasn't afraid anymore. He stumbled over his words when he realized I was there, his arrogance cracking at the edges, his eyes darting between us as if trying to piece together what he didn't yet understand. She didn't humiliate him, didn't raise her voice or betray her composure. She simply dismissed him with a firmness that made him look smaller than I had ever seen him. It was then I realized the depth of her control. She didn't need revenge in loud, messy ways. Her power was quiet, absolute, and terrifyingly effective. Later that evening, back in her penthouse, I couldn't stop replaying the moment. She poured herself a glass of scotch and leaned against the balcony railing, the city stretching endlessly behind her. I joined her, my heart still racing, my hands trembling though I tried to hide it. She noticed, of course. She noticed everything. She told me not to waste another thought on him, that he was already unraveling under the weight of his own weakness. But then she turned to me, her voice softer, almost vulnerable, and asked what I saw when I looked at her. I wasn't ready for the question, and yet it tumbled out of me before I could stop it. I told her I saw strength, control, and something untouchable, something no one could take away from her. She listened quietly, but the flicker in her eyes told me I had touched something deeper. The space between us grew heavy with unspoken things. I could feel the heat of her presence, the pull of something that was no longer just admiration or gratitude. I wanted to step closer, but I hesitated, afraid of what it would mean, afraid of what I was already beginning to feel. She broke the silence with a confession that shook me. She admitted she hadn't expected me to stay, that she had prepared herself for me to walk away after one night. But when I stayed, she realized she didn't just want to protect me from him, she wanted to keep me for herself. The honesty in her voice made my breath catch. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was something real, something raw, and it set my entire body on fire. That night, when I finally went to bed, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing against the city lights, her words echoing in my mind. I had come into her life because of betrayal, but now I wasn't sure if I was here out of pain or out of choice. All I knew was that the more time I spent with her, the more I wanted to stay, not because I was broken, but because with her, I was beginning to feel whole again. And for the first time, I wondered if healing wasn't about finding closure with him, but about opening myself to something entirely new, something fierce, something dangerous, something that might just save me. The shift between us became impossible to ignore. What had started as an act of defiance, a way of proving to myself that I could rise above betrayal, was turning into something I could no longer control. Every glance, every word, every touch that lingered too long carried an electricity that left me restless at night. She wasn't simply his boss anymore, not in my eyes. She was becoming the center of my world, the force pulling me out of the ruins of who I used to be. And yet, part of me feared it. She was powerful, untouchable, a woman who had built her life on discipline and control, and I was still learning how to stand on my own again. The imbalance terrified me, but it also drew me closer, because in her presence I never felt like the weak one. She had a way of looking at me that made me believe I was equal, that my scars weren't flaws but proof of survival. One evening, she invited me to a gala hosted by her company. It wasn't a request, it was an expectation, and something about the way she phrased it made me realize she wanted the world to see me by her side. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the dress she had sent for me earlier that day. It fit perfectly, hugging me in ways that made me feel like I belonged to a different life, one I had never dreamed of before. When she appeared to escort me, dressed in an elegant black suit that emphasized her sharp lines and commanding presence, I nearly forgot how to breathe. The way her eyes lingered on me before we left said more than any compliment could. It wasn't approval. It was possession, quiet and certain, as though she was reminding me that I was hers now, even if neither of us had dared to say it out loud. At the gala, the room was filled with polished men and women, all of them bowing slightly when she passed, all of them carrying that subtle mix of awe and fear that followed her everywhere. She introduced me simply as her guest, but the weight behind her words left no room for doubt about my importance to her. The whispers started almost instantly, eyes darting in my direction, people curious about who I was and why she had chosen me. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink under their scrutiny. I stood taller, because I wasn't just there as someone's partner or someone's forgotten shadow. I was there because she had brought me, because she wanted me seen. And in that moment, the strength she saw in me began to take root in my own heart. But the night didn't pass without tension. He was there. The man who had broken me. He spotted me across the room, his face paling as though he had seen a ghost. He approached, his voice low, desperate, dripping with false remorse. He begged for a chance to explain, to undo what could never be undone. I felt the old ache rise, the sting of betrayal threatening to choke me, but before I could answer, she stepped between us. Her presence was ice and fire all at once, her gaze pinning him to the floor. She didn't raise her voice, but the authority in her tone silenced him instantly. She told him he had already lost me, that he had no power over me anymore, and that he should remember his place before he embarrassed himself further. Watching her defend me with such calm dominance filled me with a pride I had never felt before. I wasn't his anymore, and with her standing beside me, I never would be again. When we returned to her penthouse, the silence between us was heavy, but not uncomfortable. I could still feel the intensity of her protection wrapping around me, could still hear the conviction in her voice as she put him in his place. I turned to her, my heart pounding, and asked why she had done it, why she had claimed me so openly, why she risked her reputation for someone like me. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, and then she answered in the simplest of words. Because you are mine now, and I take care of what belongs to me. The raw certainty of her statement sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a question, it wasn't even a request. It was a truth she had already decided. And though I should have resisted, should have demanded clarity, I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized I wanted it too. I wanted to belong to her, not in the way I had once belonged to him, diminished and small, but in a way that made me stronger, sharper, and more alive than I had ever been. That night, when I lay in bed, her words echoed in my mind until sleep finally took me. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel lost. I felt chosen, not out of pity or chance, but out of intention. And that truth was more intoxicating than anything I had ever known. The days after the gala felt like stepping into an entirely new existence, one where the pieces of me I thought had been destroyed were slowly being rebuilt under her gaze. She no longer treated me like a guest in her home, she treated me like I belonged there. I began to notice the subtle ways she drew me into her world, small gestures at first, like leaving a folder on the counter with notes about her meetings, asking for my opinion on things I knew little about but that she seemed to value nonetheless. At first, I thought she was only humoring me, but the way she listened, the way her eyes stayed fixed on mine as though my words carried weight, made me believe she truly wanted to hear my voice. With her, I didn't feel like an afterthought. I felt like a partner, though I knew her strength towered far above mine. Still, the space she gave me was enough for me to start seeing myself differently, to start believing I was more than what he had left behind. But with every step closer to her, the world outside began to notice. Whispers followed us wherever we went, speculation spreading like wildfire. People wanted to know who I was, why I was at her side, why she, a woman with a reputation as cold and untouchable as ice, would suddenly allow someone like me into her orbit. It was both terrifying and exhilarating, because in their curiosity, I found a strange sense of power. For once, I wasn't invisible. For once, I was being seen not for my mistakes, not for my heartbreak, but for the simple fact that she had chosen me. And yet, that visibility carried weight I wasn't prepared for. Friends I hadn't heard from in months began to reach out, some with genuine concern, others with veiled judgment. They couldn't understand why I would tie myself to a woman like her, a woman rumored to be ruthless, unfeeling, incapable of love. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't see the quiet moments when her guard slipped, when her eyes softened and her voice grew gentle, when she let me glimpse the loneliness buried beneath her armor. One evening, she came home later than usual, exhaustion visible in the way her shoulders slumped, though she tried to hide it. I had cooked dinner, something simple, but when she saw the table set, she stopped in her tracks, her composure cracking just enough for me to see the gratitude flicker in her eyes. We sat together in silence at first, eating quietly, until she finally spoke. She admitted that letting me into her life had been a risk, that she wasn't used to sharing her space or her time with anyone outside her carefully constructed walls. She confessed that part of her had wanted to push me away after that first night, not because she didn't want me, but because she feared what it would mean to want me so much. Her honesty startled me, not because I doubted her strength, but because it was the first time I realized just how vulnerable I had made her. As she spoke, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, or about proving I could survive betrayal. It was about connection, raw, imperfect, terrifying connection. She wasn't saving me, and I wasn't saving her. We were building something neither of us had expected, something that felt dangerous because it mattered so much. I reached across the table and took her hand, my fingers trembling, but I didn't let go. She didn't pull away either. The silence that followed was heavier than words, filled with 1,000 unspoken promises. Later that night, standing on the balcony overlooking the city, she wrapped her coat around my shoulders as the wind whipped through the glass towers. Her arm brushed against mine, and I leaned into her without thinking. She didn't move, didn't shift away. Instead, she whispered that she saw strength in me that I hadn't yet discovered, that she believed one day I would stand on my own with no need for anyone to hold me up. The thought both comforted and scared me, because part of me already knew that even if I could stand alone, I wouldn't want to. I wanted her. Not as a crutch, not as a savior, but as something more, something I didn't yet have the courage to name. That night I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, my heart heavy with truths I hadn't spoken. I realized I was falling for her, deeply, irreversibly, and that terrified me more than anything. She was unlike anyone I had ever known, a woman who had built her world from steel and ice, and I was just someone learning how to rebuild after being broken. And yet, when I thought of leaving, of going back to the life I had before, my chest ached with a pain sharper than betrayal. Because no matter how dangerous it was, no matter how uncertain the future felt, I knew I didn't want a life without her in it. The line between us had blurred so much that I could no longer tell where her world ended and mine began. I moved through her penthouse as if it were my own, my things blending into the sleek corners of her life, my presence becoming part of the rhythm of her days. What once felt temporary, like I was a guest waiting to leave, had transformed into something permanent, though neither of us dared to say it out loud. Every morning, I woke to the smell of her coffee, the sound of her voice on phone calls, the sight of her moving with precision through her routines, and with every passing day, I felt myself drawn deeper into her orbit. But with closeness came fear, a fear I couldn't shake no matter how much I tried. Because the closer I came to her, the more I realized how much I had to lose if she ever decided she didn't want me anymore. The tension with him hadn't disappeared either. After the gala, he became more desperate, sending messages, leaving voicemails filled with apologies and empty promises, trying to claw back into my life. At first, I ignored them, but then the anger returned, the fury that he thought he could destroy me and still expect forgiveness. One evening, as I sat across from her in the quiet of her living room, I played one of his messages aloud. His voice cracked with desperation, begging me to remember the love we once had, insisting that she was only manipulating me, that I was nothing more than a pawn in her game. I watched her face as she listened, her expression calm, though her eyes darkened with a storm I had come to recognize. When the message ended, she took my phone, deleted it without a word, and looked at me with a sharpness that made my heart race. "He has no power over you anymore," she said. "Do not let him inside your head. He belongs to the past, and you belong to me now." The way she said it left no room for doubt. Her words were not a request, not a plea. They were a declaration. And though part of me bristled at the idea of belonging to anyone, another part of me surrendered willingly, because I knew she meant it not as possession, but as protection, as a vow. That night, something shifted again. She kissed me for the first time. It wasn't soft or hesitant, it was deliberate, intense, filled with the same controlled fire that she carried in every part of her life. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything we had built crashing into that single moment. Her lips tasted like the wine we had shared, but her touch felt like something far stronger, something that reached into me and claimed every broken piece. I kissed her back, all the pain, anger, and longing pouring out of me until there was nothing left but us. Afterward, we didn't speak much. We didn't need to. The silence was alive, heavy with understanding. I lay beside her, my head on her shoulder, feeling her heartbeat steady beneath my cheek. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt safe, not the fragile safety of pretending everything was fine, but a safety born of truth. She knew who I was, what I had endured, and she wanted me anyway. And I wanted her, not for what she could give me, not for the shield she offered, but for who she was, the woman who had seen me when no one else did, the woman who had reached into the ashes of my life and lit a fire I thought I had lost forever. The days that followed were different. I felt lighter, freer, though the world around us remained sharp and unforgiving. People whispered more loudly now, their curiosity turning into speculation, their respect for her turning into quiet envy. They couldn't understand why she, the Ice Queen who had never let anyone close, had chosen me. But I no longer cared about their opinions. I only cared about the way she looked at me when no one else was watching, the way her hand brushed against mine under the table, the way her voice softened when it was just the two of us. Still, I couldn't ignore the storm brewing on the horizon. He wasn't finished with me, and I could feel the desperation in his messages turning into something darker, something more dangerous. I didn't know what he was planning, but I knew he wouldn't let go without a fight. And as I lay awake one night, watching her sleep beside me, I realized that our story wasn't just about love or healing anymore. It was about survival. Because the man who had broken me wasn't done trying to pull me back into his world, and the woman who had saved me was ready to burn everything down to keep me by her side. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. It was late on a Thursday evening when the storm I had been dreading finally erupted. I had just finished dinner with her, the two of us wrapped in the quiet comfort of routine, when my phone lit up again with his name. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something inside me snapped that night. I was tired of running from the past, tired of letting his voice echo in the shadows of my new life. Against my better judgment, I answered. His tone was sharp, frantic, nothing like the pitiful apologies he had left before. He accused me of betraying him, of humiliating him, of choosing her only to wound him. His words spilled out like poison, each sentence dripping with bitterness, and for the first time I felt nothing, not guilt, not sadness, not even anger. Just emptiness. I realized in that moment that the power he once held over me was gone, but he wasn't finished. He threatened to show up, to drag me back, to make me regret ever walking away. I froze, fear surging through me even as my pride tried to hold steady. She was across the room, her eyes locked on mine, reading every flicker of panic in my face. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. She came to me without hesitation, pulling the phone from my grip, and in that calm, controlled voice I had come to trust, she told me he would never touch me again. There was no doubt in her tone, no hesitation in her promise. She was willing to destroy him, to burn his reputation, his career, his entire world, if that was what it took to keep me safe. And for the first time, I didn't flinch at the thought of someone fighting for me. I let her words wrap around me like armor, and I believed her. The confrontation came 2 days later. He waited outside her building, his arrogance cloaked in desperation. When I saw him standing there, my stomach twisted, but I didn't turn away. She walked beside me, her presence so steady, so commanding, that I felt untouchable. He tried to speak to me first, his voice raised, his words sharp with accusation, but she stepped in front of me like a wall of steel. Her voice cut through his tirade, calm but lethal, reminding him of his position, reminding him that she controlled his future, that any step he took toward me would be the end of everything he had left. I had never seen him so small, so powerless, and as I watched, I realized something I should have known long ago: he never deserved me. He never deserved my love, my loyalty, or my pain. All he had ever done was take, until there was nothing left. I stepped out from behind her then, surprising even myself. My voice shook at first, but I forced the words out. I told him I was done, that he no longer had any hold on me, that the love I once gave him was buried and gone. I told him he had broken me, but in doing so, he had pushed me toward someone who showed me what love truly was: respect, strength, and truth. His face twisted with rage, but the fight drained out of him the moment she laid her hand gently against my back, a silent reminder that I was no longer alone. He left that night with nothing, his shadow shrinking into the dark, and I knew I would never see him again. Afterward, when we returned upstairs, I collapsed onto the couch, my chest heaving with a mix of relief and exhaustion. She sat beside me, her hand covering mine, her silence speaking louder than any words. For a long time, we didn't move, didn't speak. We just breathed together, the weight of everything slowly lifting from my shoulders. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes softer than I had ever seen them, and she said the words I had secretly longed to hear but never dared hope for. "You are not mine because he lost you. You are mine because I choose you, every day, and because you choose me too." The tears I had held back for so long finally spilled over, and I let them. I let myself grieve the past, release the pain, and embrace the truth standing before me. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't defined by betrayal or by the scars he left behind. I was defined by the strength I had found, the fire she had lit in me, and the love we had built from the ashes. That night, when I lay in her arms, the city lights painting us in gold, I realized I had found something far greater than revenge. I had found redemption. I had found love in its purest, fiercest form. And though the world would always whisper, though people would never understand, I didn't care. Because she was mine, and I was hers, and nothing else mattered. When I finally drifted to sleep, my last thought was simple but certain: I had walked through fire, and on the other side, I had found a woman who turned my pain into power and my heartbreak into home.